the past 3 years.
And for more, let's cross now to correspondent Dave Keating in Brussels. Dave, if you were a betting man, which has a higher probability of happening first, the seizing of Russian assets or the EU completely weaning itself off of Russian oil and gas?
I think I might bet the completely weaning off of Russian oil and gas, if I'm honest. This is, as you heard in that clip from President von der Leyen, already the EU has largely already weaned itself off of Russian gas, going from 45% before the war to 13% now in 2025. However, that 13% still represents 10 billion euros in Russian gas imports. Now, a lot of that is coming from Hungary and Slovakia, two countries that have chosen to align themselves with Russia, but it's not coming from them exclusively. Big countries like France and Spain are still kind of accidentally importing Russian gas through liquefied natural gas that has come through transshipments where they can't exactly tell the origin of it. So this agreement that came last night between the two houses of the legislature would mean that all of Russian gas imports have to be banned, completely phased out by the end of 2027, but most of it would come even sooner, actually. For short-term contracts, they would have to end by April of 2026. That's just in a couple of months. The long-term contracts have until November 2027. But this is essentially a speeding up of the timeline that the EU already had in place. In terms of Hungary and Slovakia, they will vote against this when this comes to a vote next week, but they can't veto it. This is a qualified majority issue. So they then will try to make a legal challenge to this, possibly by saying this should be considered a foreign affairs issue, which does require unanimity. But they're also making the argument that as landlocked countries, they can't import that liquefied natural gas, and so they should be able to have special dispensation for that.
And that 13%, is it really 13%? We know that now the EU imports oil from Turkey, which last time we checked is not a producer of crude oil.
Exactly. That's the big question about the origin and the ways that Russia is getting around the sanctions, getting around the bans on Russian energy imports. That's why we saw the seizure of that ship off the French coast a little while ago, because they are looking into ways that Russia is skirting these sanctions. And when it comes to pipelines that go through Russia, but that are actually coming from the Caucasus, originally, it's actually hard to tell what of that might be coming, what might be entering the pipeline in its transit through Russia. So there are complications here. However, most energy analysts say that the figure, even if it is somewhat higher than 13% because of this shadow energy that's coming in, it's not much higher. This is actually a pretty big EU success story in terms of very, very rapidly weaning off Russian gas. And despite what U.S. President Donald Trump says, this has actually been a pretty major undoing of that dependence, and it's actually Trump's allies in Hungary and Slovakia that are the biggest culprits in still importing Russian energy.
Yeah, and on the question of the frozen assets, that's a different story, as you say. Most of the money from the Russian central bank parked in Belgium, which hosts Euroclear, Belgium, which is wary, and there are other nations, both within the EU and outside of it, which are balking at this concept of seizing those assets.
Yeah, despite the fanfare around this announcement today, the truth is we are no further on this today than we were yesterday. It's just that the Commission has gone ahead and codified its plan, but that plan still has no hope for approval if Belgium continues to oppose it. Belgium is where those frozen Russian assets are parked, and the Prime Minister, Bart Wever, says he wants a cast iron guarantee that the legal risk for seizing those assets would be shared amongst all EU member states, and the other EU member states are still refusing to do that. So for the moment, De Wever is still an absolute no on this, and it doesn't matter whether that proposal came out or not. What the alternative here is, and this was also outlined, what could be done instead of those Russian assets is by taking out collective EU debt, so-called Eurobonds, that would fund Ukraine's recovery and the money Ukraine needs in that way. But of course, as we know from back in the days of the Eurozone crisis, Germany and the other northern European countries are dead set offset against collective EU debt. Bart Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, is saying that pursuing that route would be much more legally sound. And then, of course, as you alluded to, there are other voices outside the EU opposing this, notably the United States, which behind the scenes has been really discouraging the seizure of assets because of this legal liability issue and because of the precedent it would set if countries can suddenly just start seizing the assets that are parked there.
Stay with us, Dave, because we're going to now go inside of the Brussels bubble with a brewing story. The EU's former foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, she was detained on Tuesday. She's now been charged, along with two others, into a corruption probe into bidding relating to her job training future EU diplomats after her term in office. Caroline Baum has more.
Former EU foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini finds herself at the center of a fraud probe. On Wednesday morning, the former top diplomat was charged and released from police custody, where she was held with two other people.
The three individuals were formally notified of the accusations against them. The accusations concern procurement fraud and corruption, conflict of interest, and violation of professional secrecy.
Mogherini was Italy's foreign minister before serving as the EU's foreign policy chief from 2014 to 2019. She went on to head the prestigious College of Europe in Belgium. During the 2021-2022 period, the European Union Diplomatic Academy program, with a contract worth around 650,000 euros, was awarded by the EU to the College of Europe, with Mogherini appointed as director. Prosecutors claim that she skewed the process to favor the school. The latest scandal opens EU chief Ursula von der Leyen to criticism, as she was in her first years as president of the EU Commission when the alleged fraud occurred. This at a time when the accountability of EU institutions is under close scrutiny. The raids come on the back of the 2022 Qatargate scandal, where Doha was accused of influencing members of European Parliament through bribes and gifts, as well as a recent bribery probe into lobbying by Chinese tech giant Huawei in Europe.
We're with Dave Keating in Brussels. Yeah, the world knows Federica Mogherini from the Iran talks where she was front and center back in the day. That was 10 years ago. Tell us, what are the reactions where you are?
Everybody in this town is talking about this because this involves two institutions that a lot of people work at, the European Commission and the EU Foreign Service, but also the College of Europe, where many, many EU civil servants went to school. That's essentially a grad program that trains EU civil servants. So this is a pretty big deal, and also, of course, Mogherini was a very big figure in EU politics. Now, after she ended her term as High Representative for Foreign Affairs, a position that's now held by former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, she then became the rector of the College of Europe, and the accusation here is that essentially she somehow used her ties with the EU's Foreign Service in order to get that contract for the College of Europe to train the future diplomats. Now, she has been released because Belgium says she doesn't pose a flight risk. There are two other people also who were taken into custody, one very senior European Commission official, although this is activity that said that he was done while he was part of the EU Foreign Service. He has just came out about an hour ago. He has now resigned or taken early retirement, we're told. And so we're going to wait to get more details about this. But, you know, coming alongside the Qatargate scandal that was a couple of years ago, this is yet another black eye for the EU when it comes to perceptions of corruption.
Dave Keating, many thanks for that live update from Brussels.